I've hit the record button. We're officially live. I'm going to go ahead and start the class. I'm going to start off, well, most of it's going to be a PowerPoint because it is heraldry and it's pretty easy to show heraldry on the screen and not go back and forth to a bunch of different stuff. So I need to figure out how it's going to do this for me and make sure I can see my screen and its screen, and dang it. I'm going to have to move that over here. It's a problem with multiple screens and doing it this way. You never know what's going to pop up where.
Heraldry.
I lost my mouse. There we go.
Audrey and Kalia are on too. Click class details, go to 5 o'clock.
Okay, sharing my screen. Can everybody see my screen that says Heraldry Basics on it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just going to jump right in. What is heraldry? Most of us probably have a basic idea what heraldry is. It's the art and science of devising, displaying, and granting memorial insignia, and of tracing and recording genealogies. Or another definition, the system by which coats of arms or other armorial bearings are devised, described, and regulated. So we're not, we created our College of Arms basically on a medieval College of Arms that still exists today in England and Scotland, and I believe France has their own College of Arms as well. All right, this is going to be fun with too many screens open here. So, did I miss this? There we go. Why is it important? It shows people who you are. So back in the early days when fighters started putting on helmets, people couldn't tell who they were. It really sucked when you kill your friend instead of the enemy. So people started wearing coats or tabards that had unique combinations of colors, animals, and shapes. And from there, we developed the coat of arms. And in order to not confuse one person from another, they made each of these are supposed to be unique. Now, during the Middle Ages, England had its own College of Heraldry, and France had its own College of Heraldry. And yes, people did have the same devices in England as people did in France. In the SCA, we usually refer to those as devices because not everybody, when they design a coat of arms, has actually been awarded a word of arms. And so technically it's a device until you are awarded an award of arms. If you can tell, we don't really get too caught up on making sure people know it's either their arms because they have an AOA or a device. We just mostly refer to them as devices. This is just pictures of a couple of examples of heraldry. I had to show off the top. It's actually a shield of mine that a friend of mine is making for me. It's got my coat of arms on here, and it's also got in the background, you can see the crosses in the background. That is actually the symbol of my household. So it kind of has multiple things on here, but that is one display. Down below, you can see heraldry on multiple different shields here. If you look on a couple of them, it's hard to see, I know, in the picture because it's kind of small, but a couple of them actually have coronets on them. The one on the back leaning against the pavilion actually has a 3-point coronet. That is His Excellency Robert Despencer's arms, and he has put the coronet on there to designate that he has won a principality list and he is a Viscount. The one in the front with the green and black actually has a ducal coronet on it, as it is arms, and then also His Grace Morgan d'Antioch is on there, and he has his coronet. So that's just some ways that people are displaying their arms so people know who they are. This is another really cool picture of lots of heraldry, so you know what is what. In the top picture, this is a tapestry that was actually on display at 50-year celebration. I'm sorry, I don't know the name of the woman who created this, but if you were at 50-year celebration and had the opportunity to see this tapestry based on the Bayeux tapestry, it was phenomenal. And in the top one, you can see the two women in the forefront there. They both are women who won a coronet list in their own right. The one on the left is a Huerta. I know that because I can look at the arms, and I looked up the arms of a Huerta to find out that is indeed a Huerta. And then the one on the right is the Principality of Eldamare that is now a kingdom. And so I knew that it was Eldamare partly because it's a friend of mine who actually won that, and partly because of the arms. So it's just a cool way of showing the arms. And then below, on the below picture, that's the kingdom of Artemisia being given its writ so that it could become a kingdom in 1997. So just a few displays of heraldry. I love heraldry. I don't necessarily always actively participate in the heraldry anymore, but honestly, when I first joined the SCA in 1989, heraldry is one of those things that caught my eye and was very passionate about. So let's move on to what it is. What's the escutcheon? Escutcheon, I can't even pronounce it correctly, sorry, which is the shield. And how is it set? A lot of times you just see these arms, and people will, who know heraldry, will blast off this reason of what it is, and you're just like, what did they just say? So we're going to start off a little bit and orient you on the shield and what is what on the shield.
Is anyone else having trouble hearing? Because I cannot understand anything for like the last 45 seconds.
Same.
Yeah, it's the same.
You sound like you're far away right now.
I was getting a lot of static.
And now it's back.
So it must be I'm turning slightly, so I'll have to be
The
careful.
rest of us, let's mute so that we don't overwhelm the audio.
Yeah.
Okay, I will try to be better, and if I turn away and you can't hear me, please let me know. So we have the shield. The shield is set up from dexter, which is the right side if you are holding the shield, the left side if you are looking at the shield, and sinister, which is the right side if you're looking at the shield, left side if you're holding the shield. You can see there's various numbers on this shield. You have 1, which is in chief. 1, 2, and 3 across there is chief. You have your middle all the way down. You have the point. Oh, I missed the fess, which is the center in the going horizontal, and then the honor or nombril, which is the point at the bottom. I'm not sure I've actually really used the term honor or nombril whenever I've used heraldry terms. However, this was an item I found online, and it had those as the point. We usually just refer to it as point or in base. So now you get a little bit of an idea of what is what on the shield. Now we're going to discuss the tinctures or the colors and metals that you can use in heraldry. They have their own unique names, which I believe some of them are French in origin. So instead of red, we refer to it as gules. Sable is black. It may be hard to see on here. That doesn't look very black, but sometimes, you know, the screen monitors don't show colors greatly. Azure is blue. Purpur is purple. Vert, green. And then we have the metals, which are ore, gold, and argent, which is white or silver. And ore is also yellow as well. It can be either yellow or gold. On top of the colors and the metals, you also have the heraldic furs, which I'm sure many of you have seen ermine, which is very common with royalty in period. And you have the vair and the ermine, and then you have the various combinations of those furs. And how that is determined is how the furs are laid out on the shield. So like with the ermine, you see the points or the back of the tail. You can switch it around so it's the counter, the ermines, the erminoids. Just the way you set it in there or the colors you choose will change the terminology used for those specific furs. Make sense? And also, if you have any questions at all during this time, please interrupt me. I'm much better interactive than I am just straight talking. I know that's a surprise to people who know me because I talk a lot, but I'm really much better if it's more of an interaction than just me babbling on, because I can babble forever. So one of the things that a lot of people don't understand in heraldry is putting colors and metals together and what looks good and why you can't put red on blue and mix certain colors. And this picture here kind of gives you an idea of why. You look at this graph, and if you go from looking at argent and ore, you can't see the word no hardly in there, which is why you don't put a metal on top of a metal. Consequently, if you go down one level, you can see the argent on ore. I can barely see that on my screen. So it's hard to see those. And as you look at this picture, you can see why you would not want to mix the colors together on top of each other or the metals on top of each other, which is why in heraldry, it's either a color on a metal or a metal on a color. Does that make sense? So once we think about the colors, the next thing we usually look at are you going to have ordinaries on your device? And this is the 9 most common ordinaries that you'll see are the 9 ordinaries. Fess is probably one of the most common. The pile we all should recognize of those of us who live in Artemisia, because that is part of our kingdom arms. And then chevron is probably fairly common because it's used a lot in mundane world now. Chief, also another very common one. So these are your ordinaries. They have their own unique name called the ordinaries, and these are the different names for the different displays of them. Then you also have subordinaries, which pretty much act the same as ordinaries, but are not as common. So they are used here, are displayed here. I actually, on my original arms, I had a pawl that was inverted, and then I changed my mind later on when I redesigned my arms. But here's just a few more examples of some ordinaries or subordinaries. From there, we're going to talk a little bit about charges. Charges there's so many charges, there's no way you could list every single charge. A charge is basically your main item that you put on your shield other than an ordinary. So it's, for me, the heraldic panther that's on my device. For the kingdom arms, it's the griffins. You see people who have anything imaginable you can think of that is part of period that existed in period can be placed on your shield or on your device as a charge. It's also the primary focus when you're looking at a device. Your eyes are going to normally go to that charge. So it's your main item, main charge, I guess. So does anybody have any questions so far? I might be going kind of fast because I do tend to talk fast. I can't see the chat, so you'll have to ask me specifically.
I have a question. So my persona is Middle Eastern, and you said this is all based on European design. Is there a way to make that work?
Yes, there's a couple of really good resources for Middle Eastern. Back in the day, when I was actually a heraldic officer, there was a gentleman who was like the Laurel King of Arms. His name was Dahoud, and he put together quite a few documents on Middle Eastern heraldry. You can still access that stuff from the SCA heraldry website. I can, after this class is done, if you want to hang on a second, or if you can email me and I can get you those resources. And I'm not sure where my email address would be easily accessible, but if somebody here has my email address, will you type it into the chat, please? I don't know if anybody here has my email. So because I don't know who's all on this class. I will try to type it in before we end the class, so you have it, okay? Was there any other questions? So the next thing we're going to quickly talk about is the field divisions. Now you can see on the field divisions, they look an awful lot like those ordinaries. But what it is where is that field division happening? So on the first one, I just brought up per fess. Even though a fess is in the center of the shield, here it is per fess because we've divided the shield in the center exactly where the fess would be. So instead of being an actual fess, the division of the field is per fess. Then you have per bend, per pale, per chevron. Again, it's where you would normally have the ordinary, but instead it's just a division. The per poly or tierced, and then the per saltire. So any of the ordinaries can be used as a line of division. And then those lines don't have to be super boring and just straight, because I don't know about you, but every straight lines, even though they're easy to draw if you have a ruler, we want to be sometimes a little more creative. So we have these lines for division that are available. There's embattled, indented, dovetailed, wavy, irregularly, invected. There's quite a few more out there. One thing I will caution you on is that there are heraldry books out there that may have different lines of division, but not all of them are going to be in period. So make sure that the source you're using for your heraldry is actually medieval heraldry and not modern heraldry. When I first designed my arms, I found this really cool line of division. I thought it looked so awesome. And then I submitted my arms and it came back and it was a modern division line and not a medieval one. So I couldn't use it. So just make sure you're looking at period sources and not just using any old heraldry book that you find. There are some heraldry books that are much better than others. Fox Davies is a really good resource for beginning heraldry. It's a really thick book, but they also go in depth about what they're talking about. And I do believe they include the timelines when those things are being utilized, are used, or when they came into existence. That's just one. I honestly don't have my list for, I forgot to put together my list of books that I have used in the past. But there is a wealth of information on the internet. There definitely, if you just type in heraldry, you will find a lot of stuff. If you want to look for lines of division, you can just put lines of division heraldry in there. There's a lot of information out there. In fact, almost everything I got here, I got online. I did not pull it out of a book. So we talked a little bit about charges, and specifically I mentioned a couple of different creatures, some mythical, or actually I think most of the ones I mentioned were mythical creatures. And the creatures can be put in different positions. And depending on the type of creature, they may have a name for that position. And some positions are similar, but they have different names depending on the type of animal they are. So, for example, a lion can be rampant, and it looks like a bunny rabbit can be rampant as well. Only birds can be displayed because that means their wings are up and out. Statent, I believe, is unique for animals down on all four, but I don't think it's actually specific to any type of animal. I think I'm thinking of a different one, sorry. So these are different points, positions that your charges can be in. So right now you can tell there's a lot of different things that go into planning your device. It's not just, I'm going to slap a lion in the middle of my shield and choose these colors and I'm done. There's more to it than that. You can do that, but it's going to be kind of not boring, but it's very simple, which heraldry, simple is good in heraldry, but you also have to remember you have to do something that's unique. And so if you do something very simple, chances of conflicting with someone else are fairly high. Not to say go super complex. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying keep in mind that simple is good, but it also may lead to conflicts. So you don't become emotionally invested in your device until after it's passed. So we were talking about, I mentioned blazoning earlier on in the class. And I have a couple of examples of what blazoning is, or how to describe the shield in words. So we have this lovely picture of our kingdom arms. Now, let's say I couldn't send a picture of the actual arms to somebody, but I wanted to let them know what the kingdom of Artemisia's arms look like. Well, I can describe it to them in the blazoning. And so I would tell them that the kingdom of Artemisia's arms are sable on a pile between two griffins combatant, each maintaining an arrow or an ancient crown within a laurel wreath sable. Great, that sounds wonderful. Now, if somebody really truly understands blazoning, they can draw that fairly simple. So let's break it down a little bit more. How do we start? How do we know when to put things, where to put them? So you always start with your filled color, if you have a filled color, as the first item. So sable. We have a pile, so we're going to mention the pile, but because there's something on top of the pile, we don't just say sable, a pile, but on a pile, we have on a pile between two griffins. So we have the pile between two griffins. They're maintaining the arrow, so we're describing them. An ancient crown, which is on the pile. We know that because we've described that within a laurel wreath sable. I kind of look at it like putting on prepositional phrases when you're writing a sentence. We're putting prepositional phrases on here to define what's on there, and it's between these two griffins. I can tell you that in all the years I've done heraldry, every time I've seen somebody submit a blazon, somebody always wants to tweak it. It's not an exact perfect science. You will have discussion on somebody thinking it should be done slightly one way or slightly another way. But the general philosophy of using the color first and moving your next is your main charge and so on is standard throughout the blazoning. Does that make sense? Because that is kind of the most confusing part about book heraldry or the submission of heraldry is how do you determine your blazon?
Yeah.
And really the only way I have found to truly understand blazoning is to just dive in, go look at devices and read the blazon and then try to figure out what it's saying. And it helps if you have a picture. So that being said,
Sir Kelwin, before we move on, may I ask a question?
Yes, please do.
Looking at the blazoning for the Artemisia shield, I don't see where it describes the triangle of ore top center.
That is the pile. The pile is the ordinary, and that is what the triangle is. That's the pile. And one of the other things I didn't mention, I'm glad you went back to this because I didn't mention it. If everything is the same color, you don't need to keep saying the color. If in the string of what you're describing is the same color, you don't need to mention the color after every item. You can mention it at the end of the group of items that are in the same color. So as you can see, on a pile between two griffins, combatant, each maintaining an arrow, they're all the color ore or the metal ore, so you do not need to say ore after every single one of them.
That's where I got hung up. Thank you.
So we've got two devices on here. Some of them might be familiar as I go through these. I'm pretty sure some of these are going to be familiar to you. So does anybody want to take a stab at blazoning my arms? What would be the first thing you would say on these arms? What did I talk about is the first item that usually you talk about?
Field color?
Correct. And what do you think is the dominant field color?
Azure?
Correct. So the first part of that is azure. What would be the next item you would mention?
Probably the border. I don't remember what that's called.
So the border is not the next thing you would mention. We talked about ordinaries or charges.
Dragon or whatever that is?
It's a heraldic panther. It's kind of a weird drawing of a heraldic panther, but it is a heraldic panther or a panther. What's its position?
It's rampant.
Okay. This is kind of a unique one, and most people would not know this. It's not or, but it's or Herty, and the Herty means it's the blue and yellow, the yellow with the blue dots on it, or with the azure dots on it. So Herty is the color. Now you would mention the border and include the color, because the next item on that is on the border is not the same color, but it is a semi or a lot of rats. I did not define the number of rats. I could have said 6 rats or 8 rats, but then I would be limited to that number of rats. So instead, if you use semi, that means that you can put as many as you want on there. It just means that it's a group of them, of rats. And then we didn't really discuss all of the positions, but these rats are passant, and their feet are to the center to indicate the orientation of the rats, and the azure because they are blue. So that is my personal devices blazon. Anybody know who the one on the bottom is, whose arms those are?
I don't know, but I've seen it.
Okay, well, it's Sir Gregory of Beck, who started playing around the same time I did. And I like his arms. They're very simple, but they're very distinguishable. You generally can pick him out of a crowd if you know his arms. Does anybody want to try with the beginning of the blazoning for this one? I will give you a hint. It does
Per
have
bend.
per bend, yes.
Per bend, sinister, argent, or and azure. 3 circles. Beyond that, I'm not sure.
You're very close. Good job. So per bend, because that is a field division, not the ordinary, and sinister because the bend normally goes from the dexter side to the sinister side, but it is going actually starting from the sinister side going to the dexter side. So you want to indicate that as by putting in sinister or an azure, which are the colors, in pale, meaning they're right straight up and down. If he had done them in bend, then it would say in bend, 3 annulets, because that is the name for the circle. And because you have the blue on the yellow and the yellow on the blue, it's counterchanged because you're just counterchanging the colors. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Are we good with what we're going through so far? Does anybody have any questions? Am I boring you like crazy because it's just me talking? I hope not. So we're going to do a couple more just because I really, truly, this is the way to get a feel for how to do blazoning. You just got to do it. So anybody recognize these arms? Nope. They are the arms of Duchess Cortland, who lives in Arnhold. I will admit every single one of these sets of arms are friends of mine because, well, I know these arms well. Anybody want to give a stab at this one?
Need a cheat sheet.
You do, and honestly,
Yeah,
that's a
what I
really
was
good way to do it.
thinking.
That's a really great thing. There's all of the items I showed on my PowerPoint are just graphs or designs that I found online. And if you really want to learn how to do the blazoning, it's a good idea to have those things on, like, you know, you have a list of the ordinaries, you have a list of the field divisions and the different types of lines. If you have those things near you, then it's easier to do the blazoning. So I'm gonna give you a quick, this one is quarterly. And then, because that is the field division, when you do the colors, you always want to start from the dexter side to the sinister side. So it would be ghouls and sable. If the colors were flipped, it would be sable and ghouls. So starting from the dexter side up at the top, you go with the color that comes first. So that is ghouls and sable. And then the position of those fleur-de-lis are in Saltaire, because if you remember, was there the subordinary of the Saltaire? It's like a cross almost. So that's the positioning of those fleur-de-lis. Again, because if you just said fleur-de-lis, you wouldn't know that the bases are to the center, so you would include the description of how those fleur-de-lis are what direction they are pointing. And then they are the color argent. So the blazon for this is quarterly gules and sable in Saltaire, 4 fleur-de-lis, bases to center, argent.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Okay. When you use a quarterly, do they always have opposite corner colors? Do they only have 2, or could you do multiple colors? I don't know how that works.
You most likely would only use 2 colors, because one thing I did not mention when you're designing your arms, there is a complexity rule in there. And so if all of your colors, your charges, your ordinaries have to be less than, I'm going to say 8, but I'm going to have to verify that because it's been a long time since I've actually done submissions. If you have more than 8 of the combination of all of those, it is too complex, and they will not consider it. Also, unless you threw in, you wouldn't want to do all 4 a different color. It would be very hard to blazon it, and I'm not sure that you would have the symmetry that a lot of devices tend to have.
Thank
But
you.
I can't confirm or deny if you could do more than 2 colors. I've only seen it with 2 colors. Uh-oh, I might have a cat fight here in a second. I apologize if it gets loud. But that's a good question. And I honestly cannot give you a solid, yes, you can do multiple colors. I'm just pretty sure you can't. So the one below kind of is a hard one because of the field down below and how that is set up. Does anybody know who these arms are? I'll give you a hint. He's married to the arms on top. You don't know this? So they're Conrad von Crixen's arms. Does anyone want to give a shot at this one? To be honest, I could not do this one just off the top of my head.
I think I got the very beginning. 3 goblets in chief.
That is in there, but it is not the beginning. And the reason why, good idea, but the reason why is the field is the colors and such of the field, the majority of the field is where you want to start. So you want to look at the main area, which has the argent and vert colors. Now, we didn't see the specific field division here. This is actually a paley bendy argent and vert. And now you would mention the main charge, which, because it's dominating 3/4 or 2/3 of the shield, the main charge is the eagle. And it is in what position? We showed that one earlier. What position is this eagle in? I mentioned it's unique to the
Its wings are out. Presented?
Displayed.
Displayed, correct.
Displayed.
And now you would say on a chief, which is where those 3 goblets are, or chalices, and argent. So the actual blazon of this one, paley bendy argent and vert, a double-headed eagle displayed, and on chief, sable, 3 chalices argent. Why anybody would want such a confusing background when you have to draw your own arms? He is an artist though, so I guess, you know. So now we're gonna change it up a little bit, and we're gonna show you the blazon and see if you can describe to me what these arms look like. So the first one is gules, a chevron embattled ermine between 3 Latin crosses, botany, argent, each infiled bendwise of a county coronet or.
Well, it has a red base.
Very good.
And a sort of V shape with chunks cut out of it, but square chunks.
Correct, because that's the line of division. So when you said the triangle-y thing, that is actually one of the ordinaries called a chevron. And the line of division is embattled, which is the, like you said, the kind of square cut out. What is ermine? Do we remember what ermine was?
That's the black and white fur.
Correct. So on that chevron, there is ermine in the background. So what does the between 3 Latin crosses tell you?
There's 3 Latin crosses around the outside.
Correct. Around the chevron. So probably, if you think about it, 2 and 1, because that would be around the chevron. So you have 2 Latin crosses and 1 down below. You've got your chevron in the chevron spot. It's embattled with the ermine. Each infiled bendwise of a county coronet. That one might be a little harder to understand. Basically, it has a coronet on the crosses. And this is what, whoops, it looks like. This is actually the arms of Duke Jonathan de Clare, who was our second king of Artemisia. He actually won his crown tournament as an unbelt. So you're getting a little bit of Artemisia history too here. He was my first fight in that crown. He's 6'4", and then I had to fight His Grace Conrad, who's almost 6'6". Yeah, tall people suck when you're short. So I don't really mean they suck. They're both awesome guys. So the next blazoning, the next one we're gonna talk about is azure, a cat sagent argent with a loop of thread depending from the eyes of 2 needles, tips crossed in chief in saltire, or all within a border ermine. So let's break this one down and walk it through step by step. Azure means the background is blue. The cat is the main charge, and we know its position is sagent, so it's kind of just sitting there on its all fours like a cat does. And its color is argent, so it's white. So now you can picture so far, you have a blue field with a cat sitting on it, and the cat is white. So now we have the next part, or the next prepositional phrase, if you want to look at it from that perspective, within a loop of thread. So there's a loop of thread around the cat because it said within a loop of thread. The cats are within that loop of thread. And the thread is coming from the eyes of 2 needles. So there's 2 needles where the thread is emitting from. How do we know where those needles are and how they're situated? Well, the rest of this description tells us. The tips are crossed in chief being on top. So the tips are crossed up top in chief in saltire. So we know they're crossed. They are on the top crossed this way as opposed to this way because it's in saltire. They're gold and they're all within a border. So there's a border around the entire thing that is the fur ermine. So this is what these arms look like. So you can see, I'm trying to point, but I can't with my finger. Can you see my arrow on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So here's the cat. He's in the sagent position. We already know that the background is blue. it described that the cat was within the thread. Here is our thread that is depending from the eyes of the two needles. So each end of the thread is coming out of the needle. The needles are in Saltaire. That's the way they're crossed. And they're in chief. So we know the tip is on the top and that they're not crossed down lower facing the other direction. And then this is the border, whoops, ermine. I just totally hit the wrong key and lost everything. So I've got two more. We're kind of getting, and this is the main part I wanted to talk about. Sorry, my screen stopped sharing when I hit that as well. Can you see it now again? My screen? Okay.
Yes.
I have two more. Do you want to continue going on with this? Are you finding it helpful? Do you want to ask questions? Do you want me to show you about the armorial and ordinary where you can do searches? What is your preference at this time? Because we have 10 minutes or 14 minutes.
I'm loving it.
So this next, anybody else have an input on that? You don't care? Just keep going?
I'm having fun.
That's all that's important. You're having fun. And that you're learning something. Sorry, I'm turning away from the mic again. Sorry, my bad. So we have azure. What's that tell us?
Blue.
Okay. Inverted. What does that mean?
It means that the chevron points down.
Very good. Or, so what color is the chevron?
Gold.
Gold.
Or yellow, depending on which one you want to choose. Goutte de song. This is a new one that we haven't talked about yet. Does anybody know what a goutte is? Have you ever heard the term before? Goutte de song?
Is it a drop of blood?
It is a drop of blood. So a goutte de song is lots of drops of blood, not just one, but lots of drops of blood.
Oh, wow.
And where are and then we have issuing therefrom.
So
So
it's coming from.
It's bleeding from the Pegasus, who's in
Where's the Pegasus at?
a seated, standing position on all fours.
A demi.
He's upside down because it says he's inverted.
No, the chevron
No?
was inverted.
Oh.
His wings are folded too, aren't they?
So a demi-Pegasus, what does that tell you? It says demi.
Half. Half.
Is anybody picking up on whose arms these are?
Mm-mm.
Sean?
What was that?
Duke Sean?
Very good. The Pegasus, or half of the Pegasus, is salient. That's its position. Its wings are endorsed, which when the wings are endorsed, it means they are up and side by side as opposed to display where both of them are on either side of the animal. When they're endorsed, they're on the same side.
Hmm.
It's like instead of facing forward, the Pegasus is facing sideways.
So are Artemisia's griffins the same?
They're combatant. Oh yes, their wings are endorsed. Yes, they are. That would be correct. And then
I think we're stuck on salient.
salient is the position. It's got it's up on all fours, but you can only see the two because it's a demi peg. It's only demi. But yes, it would have, it's on two, so it's reared up. So instead of combatant, it is called salient with the horses.
I thought if they were up like that, it was rampant.
It depends on, you're right, it's not combatant. Combatant is when there's two rampant across from each other. Sorry, that's my bad. So yes, if they're up like that, it's rampant, but not 4 horses. They're salient instead.
Huh. Okay. Thanks.
And now that I've said that, I wonder if I'm saying that wrong. I'm going to have to double check on that. So if I'm wrong, I apologize. I haven't done Heraldry for a while, so that's my excuse. I forget things. So I apologize if I give you a tiny bit of misinformation. Wings endorsed and inverted. Argent. So I can see why you thought the Pegasus was inverted, as in upside down. But in this case, it's referring to the wings. Oops.
So if they're inverted, it's not, the wings aren't pointing down, are they?
So
that's weird.
this one is a little harder because I am not as familiar with horses as I am with other creatures. So give me just a second and let me pull something up that I was looking at earlier.
Find out what the actual blazoning is on it.
Well, that is the actual blazoning. This is actually from the ordinary armorial. So that's the actual.
While you're looking up stuff, what was it again that Guti just saying means?
It's multiple drops of blood.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay, that's the difference.
So I apologize. I gave you misinformation. It's hard sometimes to tell the difference between salient and rampant, but salient means it's leaping with both hind legs together on the ground and both forelegs together in the air, as opposed to rampant, which is depicted standing erect with one forepaw above the other. So the legs are not together, they're separate. That's the difference between salient and rampant.
Oh, okay.
So is this one a demi-Pegasus because it's leaping from behind the chevron?
Right, because you only see part of the Pegasus, not all of it.
Okay.
Good question. You can see how there's nothing that's exactly the same. There's no one precise formula that's going to make you the best blazoning person in the world. It really is just a lot of practice, like any other art form or anything. It's practice that helps you get to the point where you can just rattle off blazons. I still struggle because I don't do it enough, and I can't remember. There's so many different little tweaks here and there for different things. So all you can do is just keep practicing by going through, looking at arms, trying to do it, then checking to see what the blazon is. That's really the only right way to do it. So I have this last one here. It's a fairly descriptive one as well, and so it starts off as argent. So we all know by now that argent means
Green.
nope.
Silver.
Silver and white. A bend sinister. What does that tell us?
It's a bend to the viewer's right.
Issuing from the right, correct. Going down to the bottom on the left, if you're looking at the shield. Vert.
That one's green.
Green.
Between a hawk's head, Coturni, erased azure. So where do you think that hawk's head is? So if the bend is between the hawk's head and the other item, where would you put that? Where would you put that head?
The head would be above the
Right.
bend.
And the Caterni erased tells you the way it's facing, and that it's erased means it's not showing the entire head. So erased will show you, and you'll see it when I show the picture in a minute. Erased has that kind of more of a clean as opposed to eradicated, where it's all looks like they just pulled the head right off like a Medusa or something. What color is it?
Blue.
Blue, correct. And then armed, what does it mean when it's armed?
It has a weapon.
Or in the case of the bird, it may have
Talons.
talons. And what color is the armed part of it?
Green.
Okay. And a skeletal hand fess-wise. What do you think that's telling you?
It's in the middle.
No, but you got a kind of idea. What is fess-wise? If a fess is in the middle, but how is that fess laid out?
It's in the lower center.
So it is in the lower part, and I can see why you're going to center, but the fess-wise is describing how the hand is positioned.
Oh,
So fess-wise,
I hear you.
the fess-wise is telling you how the hand is positioned. And when you look at a fess, what do you see with a fess? What direction does a fess go? It's horizontal across the shield. So you know that the fess is horizontal. What do you think fess-wise means for something?
one is laying horizontal.
So the skeletal hand is horizontal as opposed to vertical or pale-wise. So it's describing, because if you just put a skeletal hand, you wouldn't know. You could put it any way, shape, or direction you wanted to. But because it specifically says fess-wise, you know that that's how it's sitting. And the color of the hand is?
Blue.
So we talked about how the hawk's head was armed, and we did talk about the talons, but because it was just the head, it's the beak that is the armed part, not the talons, because we're only looking at the head. So you can see that the beak is green as opposed
cool.
to a different color. These are the arms of Her Excellency Sir Ismenia. She's a countess down in Aytonville.
That's an interesting device.
It is. And she's a lefty. So that's why she has her bend, sinister, and her skeletal hand facing the way she does. So that is all I had on the PowerPoint. So I'm going to unshare my screen.
That was excellent. Thank you.
We have 2 minutes left. So are there any questions?
Is there a main book you would recommend as a source to learning and memorizing and practicing? Or maybe a site?
The site, there's a couple of different people that are really have some stuff out there. I found some of the stuff I grabbed, and I thought I had him. Actually, here we go. One of the tables I showed, it was a courtesy of Cormac Moore or Kevin Rhodes. Actually, well, I have a second here. I'm going to put my email in here. So Cormac Moore has an excellent tutorial online. I think it's still there. You can try looking for him. The Kingdom of the West, I believe, is where I found some stuff as well. But honestly, if you just type SCA Heraldry in there, you're probably going to find some really good sources. I haven't looked at heraldry books in a long time, so I'm not sure which would be the best one. Fox Davies is one of the most common ones that was around when I first started out. I can tell you not to use, there's another heraldry book and the author is Fryer. Don't use that one. It's not a very good one. Its sources are not very, very well for the medieval. It's more of a modern book, so don't use Fryer. Those are the, I'm sorry, I did not write, I don't, let me see if I have my list in, let's see. There is another source that I have here that is an SCA source, Lessons in Heraldry by Jael of Armida, Judy Gerjoy. I have found stuff on her page. So that's another source. Really, honestly, if you just type Heraldry SCA in there, you're going to find a lot of stuff to sift through. There's traceable art. I believe it's the Kingdom of the West that has traceable art that you can pull off for charges for for drawing different devices. There is a, I don't know, I think they've put it online now. There used to be a pictorial dictionary.
There's a Penzig
Penzig traceable art.
clip
That's the
art.
one.
Yeah,
Clip
Penzig.
art. That's the one I'm talking about. And there used to be a hand or an actual hard copy of a pictorial dictionary, but I believe that's online now too as well. I apologize. I actually haven't played in the heraldry world in the last 5 years, so I don't know what sources are out there immediately right now.
Well, this is a start. Thank you.
Yeah. So, and my email's there if you have any questions that I can help you with or pass you in the right direction, because there's a lot of knowledgeable people out there, a lot more knowledgeable than me. And I can put you in contact with them. If you're interested in names, that could be another class that somebody that could possibly be taught in the future. I'm not a name person, but if anybody is interested in that, I am friends with the current Laurel Queen at Arms, who has extensive research in naming conventions, and I can put you in touch with her.
I would love that.
Okay. Send me an email to remind me, and I will get you her information.
Will do. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just put the link to the heraldic art for Penzig clip art in the chat for everybody.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So, we're technically done. So, thank you everybody for coming to my class. I hope I provided you something. If you feel so inclined, provide me feedback. I can only get better if I know what I'm doing wrong. And constructive, good, positive things are okay too, but I really am good with getting constructive criticism. That's how you get better.
Huzzah!
So, thank you.
Huzzah.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Vivat.
Vivat.
Good night. We'll see you in court in a few minutes.
Definitely.